Thank you for joining our church online. We encourage you to visit citylightla.church for our service times, location, and upcoming events. If you enjoy our videos and would like to give to lives being changed in Los Angeles, visit citylightla.church/give.
That being said, we're going to be in John 16, Romans chapter 8. I want to give us a little bit of introduction this morning, and then we're going to get into the Word of God together. How many of you hate being misunderstood? I hate being misunderstood. Maybe misjudging someone. Have you ever misjudged someone? And what I've learned is whenever I'm misunderstanding someone, I am not having the relationship with them that I could be having. Maybe I am skeptical of them. Maybe I'm thinking they're one way they're really not. And ultimately, that misjudgment is hindering the relationship from becoming what it could be. And I believe the misjudgment that many have with God is hindering the relationship they could be having with God. The misunderstanding that maybe you were taught, maybe you just kind of developed it because you are in a fallen world and your form of God came out from your viewpoint of other things around the world. And what we're doing is we're trying to protect the identity of God in this series. We're trying to lay a foundation between this is who God said he is, and needs to be our understanding of God as we follow him and give him our lives. And so as we talked last week, some of you, your understanding of God or your misunderstanding of God is you see God just as a judge. I mean, he's got the big old judge hammer, and he's ready to slam it down on you, and therefore you're always like scared to offend the judge because you know judges can put people away for a very long time in very dark places, and you don't want to mess with the judge. Maybe your view of God is he's a scorekeeper. He's at the stat table. He's a statistician, and he's keeping track of the score, and you are always trying to perform better to have a higher score. You want your points to outweigh your turnovers, and it's very easy to think that way. I think another misjudgment that many of us have in the church world of God is we see God as a lucky charm. If I do this, then I believe God is going to give me this. If I behave this way, if I perform, if I do, then God is going to naturally reward me with these things. And what happens is when it doesn't happen the way we think it was going to happen, the way we thought it was going to happen, when life doesn't play out how we thought it was going to happen, next thing you know, we start wondering, is God dependable? Is God someone I can trust? Because I did this and I see God as a lucky charm. You misunderstood. You've seen him as a lucky charm. And you're like, if I do this, the natural result is he's going to give me this. But it didn't happen that way, so now there's this idea of I don't really trust him. I don't know if I can depend on him in that way. You know, we live in a world where, quite honestly, we want everything to be perfect. I mean, naturally, we just are crying out for perfection. Really, we're in agony for heaven, but we want perfection. And that perfection is birthed from expectation. That perfection is birthed from an expectation for this. You know, we have so many expectations in our lives. You know, before marriage, most of us have all kinds of expectations of what we thought marriage was going to be. Come on. And we had a marriage refresher on Friday night, and me and my wife went home. It was like 1 a.m. We're night owls, and we're out there, and you have to be night owls when you got 4 kids, okay? Because the only time you can talk is when kids are sleeping. And so we don't sleep, all right? And so we were out there 1 a.m. We were kind of going through our homework after the marriage refresher. You get all these questions, and we're asking them, and we felt old. We were like, man, when we first got married, and we're in our 12th year of marriage right now, we're like, dude, that's crazy. And thinking through like monumental decisions we've made and the expectations we had as young children getting married, and now 4 kids and multiple moves in 3 states and homes and disappointments and talking through it. And you know, before you get married, you have expectations. You have all kinds of expectations with each other, and many times those expectations are never communicated. You just expect your spouse to know what they are. Your spouse didn't even agree to what you expected, but you just thought they said I do, so they need to know what you expect. So they're not communicated, they're not agreed upon, but they are expectations. And many times when we don't experience what we thought or what we were expecting from our spouse, when we don't experience it, we look at them and we say, hey, can I trust you? You've let me down. You have disappointed me. Are you trustworthy? I expected this over here, but I experienced this over here. And just from speaking from life, after 12 years with my wife, the gap grows over time. The experience is here, the result or the expectation is here, the experience is here, the gap is big, and many times you fill that gap with, can I trust them? Can I depend on them? They keep on not meeting the expectation that I had. I never communicated exactly what they are. She never agreed on them, but she keeps letting me down. Expectation, experience. And I believe the same thing is true with God. The same thing is true with God. And just kind of have some fun. What are some expectations maybe you had as you came into a relationship with your wife or your husband? I mean, maybe for some it was like, I'm going to experience unconditional acceptance now. Forever. I'm going to be unconditionally accepted. Whether I stink or smell good, she's going to love me. Hubba, hubba, hubba. Come home, baby. All day, every day. I mean, unconditional acceptance. And yet, many times, we don't experience that. Our spouse can be a little bit critical. Have you ever been there before? Our spouse can, yep, that's right, preacher, she is. Your spouse can be a little bit judgmental sometimes. Critical, judgmental, always pointing out, Captain Obvious in the room, pointing it out. And oftentimes we can have our expectation and our experience be differently. Maybe in marriage you entered into it expecting constant passion. I mean, man, when you were dating, it was passionate. I mean, it was like you talked and the windows steamed up, you know? It was like, dude, you didn't have to make out. You just talked and the windows got steamy. It was so passionate. I mean, love was in the air, and you shouldn't have been lusting, but there was lust too. And man, you were just so passionate about each other. But then maybe after a while, the passion kind of in marriage kind of simmered down. There's seasons of passion. I can say that. I mean, we have 4 kids. I mean, kids pee on passion, literally. Okay, literally. And so sometimes I mean the passion kind of goes as a roller coaster up and down in seasons. So the expectation is this, but the real life experience is different. Maybe when you got married, you expected validation. I mean, this person is going to validate me and believe in me and support me in everything I do. That's funny. And maybe the experience is there isn't much affirmation in your marriage. In fact, there isn't much validation going on in your marriage. What happens is many times in these times of expectation and experience, we can sit across the table from our spouse and we can begin to think over years of having our expectations not met, we can begin to think, is this person trustworthy? Is this person someone that I can depend on anymore? I didn't sign up for this. I had an expectation, but my experience was different. So now what are we? We are perpetually disappointed. Thinking like, man, I got the short end of the stick. You know, that same thing can happen in our relationship with God that I just described. Okay, God, if you're great, okay, God, if you're good, okay, God, if you're generous, then here's my expectation. And when you don't experience what is great, what is generous, and what is good from God, then we can begin to start to think, well, maybe he isn't good. Well, maybe he isn't generous. Well, maybe he isn't as great as I thought he was, or as they said he was in Sunday school class as a kid. Maybe he's not trustworthy as I thought. Maybe God is not faithful like I thought he was. Maybe God is not dependable like I was told he was for my grandma. You know, many times we have expectations even with our children, right? I mean, every area of our life, we have expectations. I mean, when my kid was first born, you know, I was like, okay, like, dear God, help my kid not to get SIDS, you know, and you're scared to death as a parent. And I mean, reality, man, you don't want to sleep. And then you're like, stop crying, go to bed. And then they go to bed and you're like, but they're being too quiet, you know, and it's like you're torn. You're like, you want them to be quiet, but not be too quiet because you want to know they're breathing, right? I mean, then they get out of the like baby stage. Then you're like, dear God, help my kid to like be the smartest kid in the world so I can have a bumper sticker. And dear God, help my kid to get like a scholarship to college and be the best girls softball player in the state of California. And, you know, dear God, help my kid to be successful. I want my kid to have a perfect, happy life. Expectation. But the reality is, there's no such thing as a perfect life. There's no such thing as perfection. We all have got expectations. God didn't agree with those expectations. God did not go, I agree with those. We have them, but God doesn't necessarily agree with them. So we go into life naturally because we all are programmed this way, expectations for marriage, expectations for children. We want things to be this way. Then there's an experience, there's a gap. We put in that gap, dependable, faithful, can we trust him? Is he trustworthy? Jesus knew we were this way. And so Jesus writes in John 16, verse 33. His followers were looking at him to be this deliverer of the bondage of the Jews in Rome. They were looking for this king to come through their interpretation of the Old Testament, that he would arrive, and when he arrives, there's going to be no more slavery, no more pain, no more abuse. For once, the Jews are going to be delivered. And Jesus did not agree to those expectations. It's always funny how God doesn't necessarily agree with things we expect from him. And Jesus comes down and he's like, whoa, I'm gonna set it straight. I want you to know what I have validated. I haven't validated your expectations, but I will tell you what I have validated. And this is what Jesus says in verse 33. I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. He's like, I've told you these things because you're only going to find peace in me and me alone. Because in the world, you're going to have tribulation. What is that? You're going to have trouble. But be of good cheer because I've overcome the world. So Jesus is saying, I haven't agreed to your expectations. You think everything's going to be tiptoeing through the tulips. You think everything's going to be a 70-degree Southern California day, soaking up the sun. Come on, Sheryl Crow. You think everything is going to be just like great. But Jesus is like, no, man. You're going to have pain. You're going to have disappointment. You're going to have hardship. But he's like, you can smile during the pain. You can smile and you can be of good cheer because I've overcome the world. So that's what Jesus says. Pain, disappointment, tribulation. What is trouble? I kind of did a little bit of interpretation, or what does the dictionary say trouble is? What are some adjectives that define it? Misfortune. Anyone ever had any misfortune in this room? I'm the most misfortunate person in the room, Pastor. I mean, come on. Misfortune. And maybe you've ever had any pain in the room? Maybe you've had some trials. Any trials? Y'all are so good. No trials. I mean, any suffering? Any mess? Any of you got a mess right now other than your car or your house, okay? I mean, just a mess. Maybe you're here, difficult problems. How about any heartache? Has your heart ever throbbed with pain? What about some distress? Any distress? These are all synonyms. These are all synonyms with trouble. These are all, hey, this is trouble. This is pain. This is tribulation. And where are these things flushed out in? Where do we see them happen? I got a list for you. 1, marriage. Hey, there's going to be pain sometimes in marriage. There's going to be some misfortune that happens in marriage sometimes. Hey, there's going to be some disappointments. There's going to be some heartache. As we learned Friday night at a marriage gathering here at the church, that hey, your marriage is not there to make you happy. Your marriage is there to make you holy. Hey, marriage is the workroom for God's transformational work in your life. And in the workroom, there's going to be a hammer, and there's going to be a saw, and there's going to be some cutting open that happens. My spouse is there to help me become more like Christ. I mean, she's showing me things. I'm learning things. I'm learning patience. It is a workroom. There's going to be times of pain and disappointment. What about finances? I mean, finances, they're not going nowhere, church. That bill is coming, dude. The market in LA is not going down. Okay? I mean, rent is going to keep going up. The IRS is going to keep taking more, man. The child tax credit may not go. I mean, come on, man. Let's crank that child tax credit up. I'll have 5 more babies. All right, come on. Finances, there's going to be pain, heartache, misfortune. Sometimes it's because of our own stupidity, and other times it's just life. What about another one? What about relationships? I mean, it's hard to get along with people. It's hard to get along with my wife sometimes, man. It's hard for her to get along with me. It's hard sometimes to put up with little kids. I mean, I got the toddler that's trying to go poop on a toilet, and I got the 9-year-old that knows everything. and they're all women. I had to get a Yorkie male dog to get some more man in the house. I mean, getting along with people sometimes is challenging. Work relationships, church relationships. There's friction, man. There's going to be pain. You're going to be betrayed. You're going to be lied about. You're going to be judged wrongly. There is pain, misfortune. There is trouble. I mean, I'm always trying to figure out how to be a better leader. And I like to study the life of Christ because I think Jesus was the best leader. He was the most kindest, generous, giving person to ever live. And you know what's crazy? Even with him being such an amazing leader, he still had himself hung on a cross by people that attacked him. No matter how good or kind you are or how good of a leader you become, people are still going to find fault with you. Regardless. Jesus, the best, was killed by people that he was ministering to. So there's relational pain, man. I think about another one. I think about job. There's going to be job pain. There's going to be frustration and hurt and disappointment. You moved out here to LA and maybe you thought it was going to be this way. But you realize there was 100,000 others that thought it was going to be that way. And the competition is tough. And there's misfortune, there's pain, there's disappointment. Maybe it's family. where you don't really feel like there's unity in your home like there once was, or brothers and sisters, or in-laws, or mother-in-laws, or all the laws. Okay, you just don't feel like there's unity. Family drama. What about another one, man? What about health? You're not getting any younger, man. Some of you are like, dude, I'm falling apart. Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, come on, dude. And sometimes we hear the preaching of, hey, the health, wealth, and prosperity gospel. Where it's like, you know, you give your life to God and you ain't never gonna get sick and your tires are gonna go 50,000 miles, even if they say 40, and you know, everything's gonna be perfect. And then I look at the Gospels and I see all the followers of Jesus didn't have that happen. They were killed, hung, boiled alive, sickness, hardship, loss, pain. I know we have a good God that wants to bless us, but I'm just telling you right now, life is gonna have trouble. And you can be perfectly right with God and still die from cancer. And they may say your faith is too small to be healed, and God's like, no, that's just my plan for your life. And so we understand health is going to deteriorate. There's misfortune, there's pain, there's trouble, there's loss. I have a good friend where 10 years ago his child that was 4 years old died from a brain cancer, and right now on Facebook he's rehashing the 10-year celebration of his child dying, and he's just sharing his diary on Facebook and reading through the pain in his heart. I'm just thinking of my daughter Charlotte, and I'm like, I couldn't imagine losing my baby. But you know what? There's pain. There's misfortune. I'm in my office this week reading his feed, and I'm bawling like a baby. And I'm like, why is life so hard sometimes? And Jesus is like, hey, I told you. You had expectations, and you're experiencing this. It's not because I'm not trustworthy. I am trustworthy. I told you there's tribulation. But I told you can smile in the midst of the tribulation because I overcame it. And so will you one day in glorification. And so he writes to us in the New Testament, Romans chapter 8. And Romans chapter 8 is like his letter to the church of saying, hey, whatever you're going through, whatever hardship, you need to read Romans chapter 8, 28 through 29. You've got to understand, because this is what he wants you to hear today. He says in verse number 28, we know, we are confident, baby. Come on. We know that everything, man, death, loss, pain, divorce, affairs, abuse, all. I know everyone in this room's got a story. I got a story. You got a story. We all have got pain that is real. Yes, we do. And he says, hey, all things work together for good. They're producing something in your life. You got it? They're bringing about something. They're flushing something out of you. God's working in everything. To those who love God or trust God, basically, you believe that God is working. To those who are called according to his purpose. For those who he foreknew, in his foreknowledge, he knew you were going to come to saving faith. He predestined. That's the transformational work of the gospel, to be conformed to the image of his son. So God looks at you and I as his children, and he goes, hey, I'm not concerned with making you happy. I'm concerned with making you more like Jesus. And in that process, there's going to be despair. There's going to be heartache. There's going to be misfortune. There's going to be some sighing and some hammering. And God's like, hey, This is my work in your life to make you like Christ. You see, God never agreed to our expectations that every one of us have. Our marriage, our children, God. And God's up there going, hey, you had them, but I never agreed to them. I've told you there's going to be trouble. I've told you there's going to be pain. And so as we kind of make this thing applicational to our life, like we try to every week here at City Light, what does God want to do? How does God use problems, pain, and disappointments in our life? I want to answer that question for you. How do we see biblically how God uses problems, pain, and disappointments? Number one, jot it down. He uses it, one, to direct me. To direct me. And here's a statement I want you to see as you're jotting that down. Until the pain of remaining the same is greater than the pain of change, there will be no change. And I believe God will allow pain to come in to push us to change. We are very stubborn people sometimes. We got to find out that we're dying from having too much sugar until we stop eating sugar. You got diabetes. Oh, man, I got to stop eating sweets. You know, it's like we're forced to not have sweets. Right? I mean, we got to, sometimes we got to be like slapped before we change, right? So I think naturally God's like, hey, I know you're stubborn, and I know you don't want to change. So I'm going to allow the pain that you're feeling to be greater than the pain of change. My buddy Steve in Baltimore, 400 plus pounds. Good dude, man, one of my best friends. You know, some of you know him. They said, Steve, man, you're like getting close to the 5, man. You got to decide today whether you want to see your kid get married. Whether you want to be able to throw the ball one day with your kid, or else you're going to die if you don't change. You're miserable. Miserable. You know what Steve decided to do is have a dramatic lifestyle change. In 1 year, he lost 150 pounds. His goal is to get down to 180. Incredible. But you know what? The pain of he needed to change or he was going to die began to be greater than the pain of saying no to putting food in his mouth. And so until the pain of remaining the same is greater than the pain of change, there will be no change in your life. And in Proverbs 20, verse 30, the writer of Proverbs says, hey, the blows of a wound cleanse away evil. So do stripes the inward parts of the heart. This is the modern English version. One translation says it this way, and I'll give you a summary of it on the screen. Sometimes it takes a painful experience to make us change our ways. Hey, the blows of a wound cleanse away evil. So do stripes the inward parts of the heart. I mean, I've talked to friends that have lost children. I've talked to friends that have lost their marriage. And they say, man, it was the hardest thing I ever went to. But I am thankful for what it produced in my life. I wouldn't trade it in for anything because who I am today is so much different than who I was before. What happened? The pain of staying the same got greater than the pain it took to change. So God says, I will allow this to direct you, to direct me. Why did you come to God? Why did you come to church? Some of you. My story, my mother was in a divorce. Her husband was abusing alcohol, and they were in their early 20s. I wasn't even born yet. And she was in such agony and pain in her life that she was in a hotel room when my dad was down getting drunk. And she went to a Gideon's Bible and she stumbled upon John 3:16 and read for the first time that the God of the universe loved her. And she said, if this is true, I want him. And that next week, she went to a little Baptist church in Vegas where she raised all 4 of us boys with the absence of a dad for most of our lives. What happened? Pain pushed her to Scripture. Pain pushed her to the arms of a loving God. For some of you here today, it was your soul was in turmoil. Your mental state was in turmoil. Your marriage was in turmoil. Your life, your career was in turmoil. Maybe for your parents it was. And what did it do? It pushed them to God. It's directing you. People say, you Christians just use Jesus as a crutch. I say, amen, he's a good one, amen. He's more than a crutch, but I'm glad that he's someone I can lean on and depend on and I can press into in the midst of the pain. Why does God let disappointment come? Why does God let misfortune come? How does he use it in our lives? He'll use it to direct you. But then I think a second way we see in Scripture is he uses it to inspect me. Inspect me. Now I think we all have a problem with thinking higher of ourselves than we should. Only Lydia, okay? Lydia, you're suing me up here, all right? We all got it, I think. I mean, we see the speck in everyone else's eye, but we don't see the beam in our own eye. And I believe pain is used as God's tool for us to see what's really inside of us. We are all like tea bags. You put a tea bag in some hot water, and what does it do? It releases what's inside. And there are times of misfortune, times of heartache, where we didn't even know what was inside of our own heart, and we hit it, and what happens? The real you comes out. The real you of not having faith when you thought your faith was so strong. The real you of doubting God. The real you begin to see some sin come out and begin to be exposed. You're like, man, I didn't even know that was there. What in the world? What happened? You hit the heat. And when you hit the heat, you came out. Not the Sunday morning you, the real you. The you that God knew was there all along. But God needed to show you the you. So God used an event of life to put you in that hot water so you could see you. Because he's going to inspect you and for you to see yourself, to inspect me. James chapter 1, verse 2 through 4, the brother of Jesus says this, my brothers, count it all joy. You don't hear that. Hey, rejoice. Find joy when you fall into diverse temptations or troubles, knowing that the trying of your faith. What is the trying? That's misfortune, that's pain, that's heartache in relationships, finances, jobs, marriage, life. What is it doing? Knowing that the trying of your faith develops patience. Let patience perfect its work, that you may be perfect, complete, lacking nothing. That is the work of a loving God right there. See, we sing Reckless Love, and sometimes we sing that last song we sung in our worship. We're like, God, if you love me so much, why is my life so hard right now? And God's like, child, it is my love that's allowing that to come in your life. And I love you so much, I want to do a work in your life, so I'm going to allow some pain to come in your life. I'm going to allow some trouble. Church, that is the love of God. Amen. The love of God is not letting us stay who we once were, but making us who we were saved to become. Amen. That's gospel transformation. And that is where you and I as Jesus followers can say, bring it on. You will have trouble, but be of good cheer. I've overcome it. Death is a promotion. You will reach full glorification one day. No sin, no tears, no death, no pain. Forever in the presence of God. Be of good cheer. I've overcome the world. Down there on earth, you will have trouble. Just know. What else does God use misfortune and hardship to do in our life? Not only to inspect me, but to correct me. Maybe you've been at Walmart before. I get tickled at Walmart. You say, I go to Whole Foods. Once you have a few kids, you'll stop going to Whole Foods, all right? The pizzas are a lot cheaper at Walmart, okay? I'm just telling you right now. You go to Walmart. I thought Walmart was, in Arkansas, where we came from. You go to Walmart, man, you see all the women in rollers and nightgowns. It's crazy. And I thought it was just the South, but I went to Walmart in Burbank, and I saw the same thing the other day. And it's just Walmart. It's funny, you don't see that at Whole Foods. They got like armored guards there walking around Whole Foods protecting the organic veggies. Your kid misbehaves, they get a gun pulled out on them. You see that Whole Foods? They got a SWAT team over there, man. Walmart, dude, it is so funny to compare Walmart to Whole Foods. Just do it this week, okay? It's like you will just die laughing. But at Walmart, I watch kids misbehave a lot of times. I don't know why. Because no one at Whole Foods brings kids. At Walmart, they do. And so at Walmart, you got the kids. You're like, man, this kid is throwing a fit. And I'm the dude that's like behind the clothesline, the clothing curtain. And I'm like, oh, man. And I'll kind of watch, And wife's like, don't be nosy. I'm like, no, this is fun. And I'll be watching. And you're like, is that mom and dad ever going to correct that kid? I mean, that little 5-year-old is totally manipulating their parents. I mean, mom and dad are trying to play Dr. Phil with their kid. And at that moment, your kid don't need Dr. Phil. He needs something else. Come see me after church and I'll tell you. All right, let's move on. But I watch it and I'm like, dude, what's going on here? Will someone tell that kid to stop? And I think a lot of times God's like, listen, I'll tell you to stop. I'll step in because a loving parent steps in. And God steps in and says, let me correct you. See, sometimes we measure life, my goals for 2019. We overestimate what we can do in a year and we underestimate what we can do in a decade. We overestimate what we can do in 1 year and we underestimate what we can become in a decade. See, 2019 may not be the best year for you. 2020 may not be the best year for you. But you know what? God's saying, yeah, but I'm going to allow some things to come in your life in 2019 and in 2020 because who you're going to be in 2030 is going to be credible. Because I'm steering you, baby. I'm steering you in your 20s. I'm steering you in your 30s. I turned 30. I'm like, I'm mature now. No more mistakes of the 20. Now I'm 33 and I've made them all. And now I'm like 40, baby, come on. God is going to correct us. God sees what you're going to be in 10 years or 20 years. He's bringing you somewhere. He's guiding you somewhere. But before you get to the somewhere, there's going to be failure. There's going to be misfortune. There's going to be loss. There's going to be death. There's going to be tears. But God's working. Whew. Love it, dude. Proverbs 3, verse 12. From whom the Lord loves, he corrects, even as a father the son whom he delights. Hebrews 12:11. Now no discipline seems to be joyful at the time. Man, discipline doesn't seem to be fun when it happens, but it's grievous. Right? Come on, mama got you, man. It was like, ah. Okay, yet afterward, it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness in those who have been trained by it. Glory to God, man. Fourthly, this is what it does. It protects me. I got to move quick. It protects me. Write this down. This quote ought to be up in your life. Rejection is protection. We look at rejection as God did not give us what we wanted, But God's like, child, I knew what was behind that door, and if you would have got it, your life would have been ruined. Naturally, you have a God that says, I love you too much to let you go through that door. At the moment we see pain, at the moment we see trouble, at the moment we doubt the goodness of God, at the moment we're like, God, can I trust you? At the moment we see God as someone that's not dependable because the doors keep shutting in our face, and God's like, child, rejection is protection, man. I'm going to do this to protect you. I think about Joseph in Genesis. Joseph was accused of sexually assaulting a woman, falsely accused. He got sentenced to jail. He got sold into slavery by his brothers. His whole family abandoned him, and everything looked bad for Joseph. And by the way, it wasn't just a bad month. It was a bad few decades for Joseph. Some of you are like, I know, Pastor, but it's just been bad for so long, 2 years. I hear you, man. The cloud's hovering. When's the daybreak gonna come? Joseph says after the fact, but as for me, Genesis 50 verse 20, but as for you, people that were out to get him, you intended to harm me. He's like, but God, listen, the people that were trying to pull you down were pawns in the hand of a loving God. The people in your life that you see as your enemies, God's got them in his hand. They're puppets. The sovereign hand of God is allowing and guiding people. But God intended it for good in order to bring about working as it is this day to save many lives. God put Joseph as the second most powerful man in the world. And he was used to free over 1 million plus people from slavery. But he got there through pain, misfortune, and heartache. Not only to protect me, but to perfect me. 2 Corinthians 1, 8 through 10, to perfect me. What does God want to perfect in you? This is where the rubber meets the road. We pack up, we go home. What does God want to perfect in you? For we would not, 2 Corinthians 1, 8, brothers, have you ignorant of our troubles? You ever talk to someone and they act like their life is perfect? And you're like, dude, you're lying. I love real people, man. I'm real. Sometimes I'm too real. I said bird poop last night when I was preaching last Sunday. I got a mean email about saying bird poop in the pulpit, okay? So sometimes I'm like just too much. But these dudes show up and they're like, for we would not, brothers, we don't want to put a front on. I don't want you to be ignorant like my life is perfect. I think transparency is important, church. People aren't drawn to your strengths, they're drawn to your weaknesses. We don't tell Burbank we're perfect here. We tell them we're broken here. And you can come too because you're broken. We came to us in Asia. We had pain in Asia. We were pressured beyond measure. We had pressure above strength so that we despaired even of life. Like we didn't even want to live. It was painful. We had the sentence of death in ourselves. Notice this. So what? What is it working? As you read the Bible, what is it working? What's it producing? Pain producing. So that we would not trust in ourselves. God allowed the pressure to bring about a perfection, and the perfection was bringing them to trust in God. But in God, who raised the dead, he delivered us from so great a death and does deliver us. In him we trust that he will still deliver us. I think it's in those moments when we're in tears, we're in pain, we're having misfortune, we have heartache. Whatever you've gone through, church, some of you got some stories that are so painful out here. And you just feel like giving up. I think it's in those moments that God's in heaven going, man, I got them right where I want them. Because it is when you come to an end of yourself, you're now in a position to reach up to God. You're now in a position to get on your face and say, God, I've tried it myself. I've tried it my way. I'm done. Now I'm going to trust you. Faith is the refusal to panic. God's in control. What are my next steps for developing trust in God? Where do I go with this, Pastor? What are my next steps? 1, trust God with my circumstances. Where are you at right now? Stats would show that the majority of this crowd, you're in some real deep stuff right now. You've got a lot of questions about life. You've got a lot of big decisions to make. Trust God with my circumstances. 2, trust God with my finances. No matter how hard it is, I'm going to let faith speak louder than doubt. People say when I have enough, I'll start giving to God. And God's like, dude, you got it all backwards, dude. All backwards, dude. And God's like, my little silly child, you got it all backwards. I still love my silly ones, but you got it all backwards. Trust God with my finances. Thirdly, trust God with my time. Oftentimes, we think the harder we work and the more we push, you're like me, I'm a fixer. I'll do it myself. I'll bite on like a bulldog and not let go. And God's like, dude, Nick, grace works while you rest. Just relax. Work your 40. Date your daughters. Love your wife. Tuck your kids in at night. Don't try to solve it yourself. I got you right where I want you. I'm going to trust you with my time, God. I'm going to stop trying to fix everything on my own. I'm going to surrender. Amen? God is trustworthy. I'm going to pray. I'm just going to have a piano player come today. We're not going to close in song this morning. And I'm going to pray. As I pray, you just may just need to talk to God from your seat and to say, God, I'm here. Help me. Sometimes I just got to say, help me to God. Just talk to God in your seat. After I pray, Josh is going to come, our adult ministries leader, and give us some closing announcements. We'll be on our way. Father in heaven, we come into your presence right now. We thank you. We celebrate you, Lord.